Let's take a look at 3 examples where we learn to reduce ratios with terms that are decimals and fractions. The question reads, reduce the ratios to lowest terms. Focusing on the first example, notice how the first 3 terms of the ratio are decimal numbers. Before we can start reducing the terms down using common divisors, these decimal numbers need to be made into integers. We do this by multiplying each term by an appropriate factor of 10 to eliminate the decimal places. So if I start by multiplying by a single factor of 10, notice that I'm multiplying each of these terms by 10, I end up getting 2 to 1.2 to 3 to 10. But notice that the second term, 1.2, still has a decimal. So we multiply by another factor of 10, and this should clear out the decimal numbers. You're also more than welcome to multiply the original ratio by a factor of 100 instead of 2 factors of 10, which we did here. And with that being said, we end up getting the ratio 20 to 12 to 30 to 100. Now the first thing that I notice is that all of these numbers are divisible by 2 since they're all even. So I'll divide them all by 2, and this gives me 10 to 6 to 15 to 50. And at this point, there is no divisor other than 1 that divides all 4 of these terms. This is our reduced ratio in lowest terms. We can also point out that this 2 is the greatest common divisor, or the GCD. Let's move on to question B. This time the terms in the ratio are fractions. Unlike in the first example where we multiplied all of the terms by 10, here we must multiply all the terms by the lowest common denominator. That will clear all the fractions and make them into integers. Let me show you what I mean. The LCD of 6, 4, and 2 has to be 12. And here's why. If we write down the multiples of 6, 4, and 2, those are the first 3 for 6, and the first few for 4 are 8, 12, 16, and so on. And for 2 are 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and so on. Notice that 12 is the common multiple amongst all 3 of those rows. And so the LCD for us has to be 12. Once you find that number in whichever technique you've used, you then take it and multiply it by all of those fractions. Now, if you choose not to find the LCD, but instead simply find a common denominator, which I'll denote as CD, you can multiply all the denominators together. For example, 6 times 4 times 2 would also work in making these fractions into integers. That amounts to 48. But since we already know the LCD, we'll just continue using it. We'll now take 12, multiply it to 1 over 6. We take 12, multiply it to 9 over 4, and once more 12 times half. Now, you can use your calculator to do this, but I know that 12 times 1 over 6 makes 2. 12 times 9 over 4 makes 27, and 12 times 1 over 2 makes 6. And there is no common divisor at this point that will reduce this any further other than the value of 1. So 2 to 27 to 6 is our ratio reduced to lowest terms. And finally, in question C, we have a combination of terms that are fractions and a term that is a decimal. Before we can multiply by factors of 10 to make this into a non-decimal, we must change 2 2/3 into an improper fraction. So to make 2 2/3 into an improper fraction, we retain the denominator of 3, and we multiply 3 by 2, which is 6, and add to it the numerator, and that makes 8. So we now have our fraction being 8 over 3 to 0.3 to 4 over 5. Just like we did in question B, at this point I'll find the LCD between 3 and 5. When will the multiples of 3 and 5 be the same? And I know that it happens to be 15. You're more than welcome to multiply the denominators together as well, and that will confirm that it is also 15. So we'll take 15 and we'll multiply to every one of these terms. That will clear the fractions. But it won't clear the decimal term, and we're expecting that. So we take 15, multiply it by 8 over 3. I'll show you how to do it on your calculator in case you don't know how to do it by hand. You take 15, and in parentheses, we write down 8 over 3. And that amounts to 40. Multiplying 15 by 0.3, 4.5. And multiplying 15 by 4 over 5 gives us a value of 12. We will now multiply by a factor of 10 to eliminate this decimal and make it into an integer. So don't forget to multiply each of these terms by a factor of 10. That gives us 400 to 45 to 120. Now immediately I notice that a common divisor amongst all three of these is the value of 5. So I'll divide them each by 5. If I divide the first one by 5, I get 80. Dividing the second term by 5 gives me 9, and the third term by 5 gives us 24. At this point, there is no common divisor other than one that will divide 80 to 9 to 24. So 5 is our greatest common divisor, and this is our ratio reduced to lowest terms. Now be mindful that sometimes you might end up getting a ratio after dividing by a common divisor that will need to be reduced further. So you'll have to find another common divisor until eventually you reach the ratio written in lowest terms. If you have any questions about this, please use the comment section below. I thank you for watching, and we'll see you all later.